Hello world, welcome back to the channel, and it's that time once again where I invite you to a fireside chat summarizing my creative life within the past 2 months, talking about my projects, real life escapades, and gush about what series I've been into lately. In this video, I'll be summarizing events from both June and July, so without further ado, let's begin. So how have you been, dear viewer? How's summer treating you? Did you have a good Pride Month? What ArtFight team did you pick this year? Technically, I was on Team Comedy, but purely as a spectator, I didn't participate at all. Which is sad because it's the 10th anniversary and the first time I participated was in year 1, so the FOMO definitely hurts. At the same time though, my roster of active OCs that I could even add to ArtFight is a cry for help right now, so I need to put in the effort of getting their stories and actual characters more developed. On top of that, my last year participating in ArtFight was an immensely depressing disaster for a multitude of reasons, but that's a whole other can of worms, and for that reason, me not joining this year is a huge net good for my mental health overall. I can't be disappointed if I don't participate at all. At this part of the video, I wanted to point out that I'm recording this voiceover with a new microphone, and I wanted to know if you liked how this sounds or if you prefer the condenser microphone I've been using before. I finally put those Best Buy gift cards I traded my geriatric iPad and Apple Pencil for to good use by getting a lav mic set for like half off with the intention of clipping one of them to my drawing glove so I could film some ambient sound drawing ASMR videos. Not to mention, having a more portable microphone will make recording my usual voiceovers a lot more comfortable and versatile as well. On the topic of upgrading my equipment, I was this close to biting the bullet and upgrading my version of Clip Studio Paint to 2.0 while it was on sale, because apparently the information I was given about forfeiting your ability to install Clip Studio Paint on 2 devices with the same license when you upgrade to 2.0 and higher was inaccurate, and if I could have my bread and butter drawing software on both my PC and laptop all at the same time while running the latest version, then I would be extremely powerful, because man oh man, the Smart Line feature they added in the newest update is such a deal maker for me. This was by far my favorite feature in Procreate and I miss it so much. I was trying to do more digging on how to upgrade both devices before I pulled the trigger and dropped cash on it, but I failed to complete my research to a satisfactory level before the sale ended, so that's on me. I guess for now, if I want to make cozy ASMR videos, I have to stick with the vanilla Clip Studio I've been using all this time. While it's probably a bit of a stretch to say I'm burned out on making draw and talk videos, although there are some specific commentary topics I had in mind for the first half of this year's upload schedule, and I'm disappointed that I ran out of time to make them. I've had an increased appetite to try making other videos that go beyond my usual voiceovers and speed paints, mostly because it takes so long to draw a completed image, then write a script, record the voiceover, trim the audio, add captions and music and all that jazz, so I just wanted to see if I could actually make videos that contain less steps while still being fun and not feeling fillery, if that makes sense. I'm trying to improve my YouTube trust score too, so that's another motive I have for trying new things with my content, just to see if my audience is waiting for me to make types of videos that I currently am not uploading. It's also why I've been dipping my toes into making animation memes again, even though I'm really rusty with and intimidated by animation in general, which probably sounds strange to anybody in the art community who's known me for a long time, because they probably found me through the fanime community back when the caged underworld and space drops were still a thing. This is a perfect segue for me to address the elephant in the room about my sparse activity with uploading videos and posting art these past couple of months. There's been quite a bit going on in my life behind the scenes since my last recap, mostly involving me completing freelance work. Plus, with it currently being summer, the heat has really been tanking my mileage and it bothers me tremendously. What's the opposite of seasonal affective disorder, if that's even a thing, where your mental health ends up in the toilet during the warmer months? I don't know what it was that slowed me down so much in June, whether it was freelance, or the heat, or becoming a year older, or not being able to have weekly hangouts with my best friend anymore because she's got a job that's gonna take her to the other side of the globe for 6 months, or needing to recover from the emotional torture that was editing the video for Mints Past and Woof Woof Power, or just the cumulative effect of all these occurrences and more. But for whatever reason, during the entire month of June, June, my brain felt like it was in a perpetual state of installing updates. Then, for reasons I can't explain, literally on the very last day of June, the fog had lifted and all of my motivation had suddenly come back, almost as if my brain was like, okay, installation's complete, get back to work. The only problem was so much had piled up during that time that trying to choose which task to get started on first was pretty paralyzing, so I ended up wasting even more time because of that. As if this wasn't enough, I got a new idea for a story at the beginning of the month, so I've been distracted writing down new ideas and doing research for it, so that's fun. Jokes aside, I'm glad that even despite me not drawing as much as I wanted to lately, I wasn't completely and totally unproductive, and I was still able to develop ideas for future projects. I guess it's an unexpected fringe benefit of ADHD hobby hopping. And honestly, I shouldn't discount the progress I have been able to achieve because I've been able to make some really good gains throughout July. First off, I've been writing scripts for a bunch of videos. Second off, I completed the final draft for another one of the standalone manga on my project roadmap. When I first started writing the script for this video, I was dangerously close to finishing the draft and was sharing what my current page count was and how many more I had left before it was finished, but now it's done. Now I have the final drafts of my next several one-shot manga written from beginning to end, and the only one left to go from my book of short story collections is I'm the Sidekick, which in theory should be pretty easy since I actually did write a draft of it several years ago before I ended up making a bunch of changes to the plot and characters. Funnily enough, I was kind of worried about getting started on I'm the Sidekick because it's currently my longest manga in the short story collection at 40 pages, but then this other manga that I just completed the final draft for also ended up being 40 pages, and it's a story that I've been super hyped about diving into drawing the pages for a really long time now, so I'm really hoping that enthusiasm will rub off on I'm the Sidekick. And of course, the biggest accomplishment of all, I completed all 10 pages of Croquis and Candlelight from beginning to end, and you're watching me draw the front cover for it right now. I happened to get sick the exact same day I finished the comic, so I guess I was feeling too much like garbage for the reality of this achievement to properly sink in yet. But it was still wonderful to edit my Notion page for my original projects and put this story right next to 𝚖𝚒𝚎𝚎 in the completed section. The saddest thing about this though is literally the only reason why I got over my Croquis and Candlelight burnout and pushed to get it done after not picking it up for over 2 months is because I was running out of time to get a video uploaded, and remember that I had inked about 3/4 of the comic already, so I had this renewed burst of motivation to finish it just so I could adapt the panels for YouTube. It's ironic that this particular story that primarily takes place in a forest was the one where I let the grass grow under my feet over the course of me making it. To me, this was all the proof in the world I needed that compartmentalizing my comic work and my video work and not allowing me to work on my manga as part of a video is a bad idea, especially because when I was working on both 𝚖𝚒𝚎𝚎 and Croquis and Candlelight, my video uploads really started to decay because of this split in attention. To be fair, 𝚖𝚒𝚎𝚎 was created for the Storyboard Volume 2 comic speedrun zine, and there was an embargo in place for how much I could publicly show or talk about the comic before the zine came out. Plus, I had a small backlog of videos that I could lean on to help keep the channel active during that time. But still, for my other projects that I'm creating for myself, and not as part of a larger collective where those restrictions are in place, I really need to be more proactive and obnoxious about talking of my OCs and stories, because I keep falling into a trap where I think I'm posting more about them than I really am, because they're always on my mind and I'm always developing them in secret, but then in secret is where they end up staying. I'm almost certain this is a side effect of when I was a teenager who was still working on massive passion projects like Blooded Gemstones and the Caged Underworld, but had my eye on pitching them to people in the industry, so didn't want to spoil anything too bad. On top of me still being in my spitball concept at the wall and see what sticks era at the time, so even if I was put in a room where I could babble about my emotional support stories to my heart's content, I really didn't have anything meaningful to add to the conversation because my plots and characters were a jumbled mess and I had no idea what I was doing. Now that I've mercifully outgrown these stages of my creative journey and feel a lot more confident in my writing ability, I guess the main hurdle I have left to overcome is my trauma from interacting with people who really didn't care or what to hear about me talking about my OCs. Basically, I just need to find my people. To anyone watching this who wants to become one of those people, I am giving you permission to cyberbullying me into yapping about my original stories and characters on the greater web, because this is something I have sucked at for my entire life, and I don't want to suck at this anymore. How do I stop sucking at this? Alright, now that I got that out of my system, what's next on the horizon after finishing and releasing 2 complete original stories? Well, naturally, start drawing the pages for story number 3. But there's a catch. I'm still so ashamed and disgusted that it took me several months to complete a single comic with a page count that's less than a standard manga chapter. This applies to 𝚖𝚒𝚒𝚎 as well as Croquis and Candlelight. So for my next comic project, I am determined to break that cycle and increase my page output. I did time each step of the process for all 10 pages of Croquis and Candlelight, and on average, thumbnails took me between 6 and 7 minutes, sketching took roughly 2.5 hours, and inking took roughly 4 hours. As you can see, it's not like it takes me an absurd amount of time to finish a page, especially with how detailed my art style is, and in fact there are plenty of areas where I can speed up my process without loss in quality, so in theory, if I applied what I learned about my workflow to my next comic, I could walk away with a much better average in the end. But, as is the recurring narrative of my life, overwhelm paralysis continues to blight my productivity, which I sincerely believe restructuring my YouTube content to include my manga page creation process will help me to overcome, especially now that I've been slowly trying to get back to structuring my schedule where I alternate between working on videos and working on manga during the weekdays. With this in mind, I can include recording B-roll of me drawing manga pages for my original stories into those days where I work on YouTube videos, and on days where I work on manga, I can dedicate that time to finally checking all the 1,000,001 fan art ideas I have off my to-do list. Which leads me to my next big talking point about another manga I want to pick up next after finishing Croquis and Candlelight. I debated for a while whether I should be more straightforward or more coy about this fan project that's been taking up most of my brain space for the past several months, but I'll go ahead and reveal the secret here, which is that as part of my celebration of the 40th birthday of my favorite video game villains, Bobby and Dan Barrows from Clock Tower, I'll be drawing a set of fan manga in their honor. One is basically a manga version of an AMV in that all of the pages are drawn based on the lyrics to one of my favorite songs that I think matches the twins perfectly, because I'm much more confident in my ability to lay out a sequence of comic panels than I am in my ability to create animations or even animatics. And the second is an original scenario I wrote myself involving a requisite afterlife reunion between the brothers. If you've been following my YouTube community posts, or any of my other posting activity across my social media, then you'll know I've been very active in doodling silly little Clock Tower comics this past year, but the overwhelming majority of those comics have been meme redraws, so I'm eager to contribute something to this fandom that has more originality and effort put into it. And both of these comics are similar in length to both 𝚖𝚒𝚎𝚎 and Croquis and Candlelight, so working on them will also contribute to my goal and challenge I set for myself to finish a manga in a more efficient time window, especially since I have a hard, predetermined deadline that I need to stick to in order to get both manga done and uploaded in time for the twins' birthday on November 7th. As much as I self-flagellate over taking so long to finish 𝚖𝚒𝚎𝚎 and Croquis and Candlelight, the more I think about it, the more I realize the journey both projects set me on wasn't just about the process of creating a story from start to finish, but achieving internal milestones as well. 𝚖𝚒𝚎𝚎 was the first proper non-gag strip narrative manga I had created or attempted to create in 13 years, and it gave me practice with working on a set deadline and with a really tight page count. With Croquis and Candlelight, it was a process of figuring out how to properly manage my time for the creation of each page, finding the methods that worked and the ones that didn't, and on those fronts, I think it would be better to classify the time I spent creating each of these manga less as failures and more of a learning experience, with the hope of making my next comic turn out better than the last one, whether that next comic stars my OCs or the Demon Twins. So yeah, my next step after finishing Croquis and Candlelight is to work on both the Barrows Twins manga and my third original manga at the same time. Whether you associate me with my self-created stories or with Clock Tower fan art, please intercede to the Great Father on my behalf so I can actually hit these goals within my desired time frames and not fall victim to autistic burnout again! Moving on to the yapping about books I took off my TBR segment, Alas, in addition to June being a weak month for drawing, it was also a weak month for media consumption. I don't know what kind of state I was in during that time. I think I just needed to hibernate or something. However, it definitely wasn't a weak month for growing my manga backlog, because within the span of a few weeks, I was able to add 24 different books to my collection, and I'm still kind of in disbelief that this happened. It all started with me making more progress in completing my collection of Mega Man and T-Warrior. I got volume 10, and with my mom's help, I was able to get volumes 5, 6, 7, and 8, so now I just need volumes 9, 11, 12, and 13. A few days after this happened, my mom sent me a photo of a huge assortment of different manga, asking if I wanted any of them, and I assume she found another eBay listing and wanted to get some more for me as like a belated birthday present or something, but it turned out these were actually manga my dad got, and he wanted to know if I wanted them. Despite there being a lot of bad blood between me and my dad, I said yes because hey, free manga. So on one of the days he had visitation with my brother, he gave them all to my mom to bring home. So that's the story of how I got my hands on volume 1 of Fruits Basket Collector's Edition, the first 2 volumes of Hirayasumi, and the first 10 volumes of Komi Can't Communicate. I'm not sure which unanswered question is bugging me the most about this new batch of acquisitions. Which of these manga am I going to start reading first? Or why did my dad pick these up in the first place? It's extremely unlikely that he bought these as gifts to give to me. Knowing him, he probably got them for himself and later decided to pawn them off onto me because he knows how much of a filthy weeb I am. I want to know exactly what the sequence of events was that led to him entering a store, seeing Fruits Basket on a shelf, and deciding it was worth buying. I mentioned before that my best friend had to travel abroad due to a job offer, but despite that, she still wanted to spoil me for my birthday by buying some books from Barnes & Noble and having them sent to my address. So through her, I was able to get the second volumes of Shugokara 20th Anniversary Edition, Jewel Joker, and Magical Girl Dandelion, plus volumes 4 and 5 of Is the Order Rabid. And for her immense generosity, I am truly grateful. To wrap up this crazy manga maxing adventure, I did some shopping on my own so I could use a birthday coupon I got from my local comic shop, and when I arrived there, I finally saw something that I had never seen in any brick and mortar bookstore before, but had been on the hunt for years, which was a copy of Volume 1 of 𝚢𝚘𝚎𝚎. Normally, when I come across a book in a store that I haven't read yet, I like to read it before buying it, but that tradition wasn't honored in this case. There were only 2 copies left on the shelf, so I made sure to grab one while it was still available because I didn't know when I would find one in person again. Also, the store was about to close by the time I got there, so I had no choice. On that same trip, I went to Barnes & Noble, where I was able to find, read, and buy another manga that I'd known about and had been really wanting to take home for a long time, which was Cat Life Balance, or Kurone-san Doesn't Meow. The way I found out about this manga was kind of interesting. I found the artist Blue Sky and was immediately mesmerized by their gorgeous art style and penmanship, so I began saving a lot of their panel crops into my art on block folder. When they announced that their manga was going to have an official English translation, I was so excited to check it out, and I'm absolutely loving it so far. Both the art and the story are so cozy, and I can't wait to see what happens next. Mamoru and Kurone are both such well-developed and endearing characters. Especially in Mamoru's case, I really appreciate how he clearly has a lot of room for growth and improvement over the course of the story, but his starting point doesn't involve him being flawed in the sense of being a horrible person. Don't get me wrong, I'm just as much of a sucker for the lovable jerk trope a la Tamaki Suo and Emperor Kuzco as much as the next person, but this particular spin was really refreshing to see. Towards the beginning of June, I was able to complete a manga series I had been piecemealing copies of in random order and finally sit down to read it from start to finish, which was Tokyo Babylon. I had known about this manga for a long time now and first started reading it a couple of years ago through the Yen Press translation of the Clamp Premium Collection release. At the time, only the first 4 volumes were available in English, but now I've been able to get my hands on all 7 books. Prior to that, I did really enjoy the story so far, and I tried to convince my friend to give it a try one day while we were at Barnes & Noble, but the age gap between Subaru and Seishiro was a big ick for her that she couldn't get past. And yeah, I totally understand that. I don't know if this is a feeling other storytelling hopefuls who've had a passion project in the oven for years can relate to as well, but reading Tokyo Babylon makes me feel weirdly nostalgic for back when I was still actively creating the Caged Underworld, back when it was going to be a YouTube fan anime, because this manga was basically what I hope my own project would be like. A blend of yaoi, supernatural action, wacky shenanigans, compelling social commentary, and heart-wrenching tragedy. Seriously, I will never recover from just how much of an emotionally devastating knife twist Volume 4 was, and then Volume 5 was even more painful. Subaru is extremely precious, he desperately needs a hug, and it will also never not be funny to me that across his different animated appearances, 3 of his seiyuu were also in Danganronpa. The entire time I was reading the manga, he was giving me major deja vu in the form of Hikaru from Magic Knight Rare, and I don't know how to fix this. But now that I've mentioned it, you probably see it too if you haven't before, right? At first, Hokuto did get on my nerves, but from Volume 2 onward, I really warmed up to her considerably, and she ended up becoming one of my favorite characters. And I thought Seishido was really interesting too. I feel like normally with characters like him, where his outward persona is really a cover for his true personality that is much darker, readers would expect to see a reveal of the full picture behind why he puts on a front right after this discrepancy is first brought to light. But no, Clamp were able to masterfully weave this uncomfortable balance between Seishido's persona and his true self really well to keep you guessing throughout the entire story until the big payoff at the end, making the entire wait and guessing game worth it during the climax. And the reread value for the entire manga is boosted because of that, which is something I always love to see. It really encourages you to go back to see how certain scenes are recontextualized in ways that probably would have been less fun to read if the reveal happened immediately after you got the first hints of the twist. And of course, the artwork and page compositions are absolutely spectacular, but would you really expect anything less from Clamp? I know Tokyo Babylon was serialized really early on in their career. I believe it was only the second non-doujinshi manga work they've done, so looking at how much their art has evolved from the start of their portfolio of original stories, it's like seeing them go from a 10 to a different kind of 10. Sticking with BL, because apparently 2026 was the year of my Fujoshi awakening, another manga I was able to finally take off my TBR was Sayanai Boko wa Kimi no Hiro, and it was so cute! I picked up this series to read some wholesome fluff and walked away from it with all the wholesome fluff I was expecting, for better or worse. If you asked me what my biggest critique of the manga was, I'd probably say that I wished it was longer, but I think it goes further beyond that. Like, the manga began and ended at the same emotional peaks and remained in that same continuum throughout all 10 chapters, which left me wanting so much more from the story. It would have been really nice to see how events would play out once Ponjiro and Konosuke became an official couple, but here it felt like the manga ended before it had a chance to begin. I think I could say the same thing about the artwork as well. Perfectly serviceable, not bad by any means, but also plain and unable to draw you in emotionally. The panel layouts, backgrounds, and the characters' expressions and body language all felt mostly static, and I noticed there were a lot of scenes where background or set dressing details were just 3D models that got dropped onto the canvas and had a halftone effect applied over them. Of course, there's nothing wrong with using 3D models in your artwork at all. I've relied on them heavily in my own illustrations and manga, and I'll continue to do so in the future. The problem I have is how detached they look from the rest of the artwork that's drawn organically. Like, compare how this manga incorporates 3D models in its set design with how Shadow's House does. I guess I just wish there was more of an effort put into using 3D models without it being obvious that the mangaka used 3D models, you know? Overall, this was a very cute and comforting manga full of empty calories, no pun intended, and while I was personally expecting something a little more substantial from the premise given, sometimes empty calories are all you want, and there ain't nothing wrong with that. As if to prove my previous point, during this month I revisited a very nostalgic manga that I used to check out from the library as a kid but never managed to read all the way from start to finish until now, which is Dream Saga, or Mugen Densetsu Takamagahara by Megumi Tachikawa. I think I made it only up to the 3rd volume when I first read it all those years ago, and I barely remembered anything about it as an adult, so it felt really good to finally see how it ended after all these years. I think a more cynical reader would just write it off as a poor man's Fushigi, but I really love the dream world aspect of the world building. I thought that was super fun and unique, and the environmental themes also helped it stand out. Also, I was really surprised, pleasantly so, by just how dark and existential the final climax got, and I know the climax of Tachikawa's later series, Cyber Idol Mink, had a very similar dramatic tone in that regard, so I can't help but wonder if this is a recurring theme throughout the mangaka's work. I haven't read 𝚖𝚒𝚒𝚎 all the way through though, and I haven't read Hot Typhoon at all, so for all I know, this could have just been a funny coincidence. Of course, everything worked out for our characters in the end of both stories, but I appreciated the effort to go darker in these all-ages shoujo manga. That being said, the last 2 volumes felt very rushed. Like, instead of giving the reader enough time to process each new plot twist and sequence of events, it really felt like the story had basically become a checklist of getting from one scene to another. There were times when Yuki felt pretty overpowered to the point where the other characters' contributions only seemed to matter because the story said so. And while I did appreciate the message the main characters were trying to convey of how, yes, there are humans who have done terrible things to the environment and that's why nature has turned on them, but there's still some good humans out there, I felt like that point was beleaguered a little too much and a little too transparently when there could have been alternate ways of communicating the same message in ways that would have made the story more impactful. Case in point, I really believe Tsukuyomi was a character who deserved some sort of a redemption arc, because while he is causing harm to the environment, his overall mission felt more complex than just mustache twirling villain, muahaha, muahaha, and I think having a scene like that could have made the message even more impactful. Yes, there are good people in the world, but bad people can also repent from their ways and become good too. Also, without giving too much away, there was one part of the last volume that reminded me so much of the allow the trees aura to become one with your own meme, which made it impossible for me to take this intense moment of the story seriously because I was laughing so hard. In summary, this series is far from perfect, but its flaws weren't enough to ruin the fun adventure it had to offer, and I'd be more than happy to go on this fun adventure again. For this next series on my media consumption list, I did something that I'm ashamed to admit I haven't done in a really long time and should do a lot more often, which is read actual books instead of comics. Those being Jennifer and Helen's Clock Tower 2 Choose Your Own Adventure novels. With this, my Clock Tower spoiler Jeoban has finally been posted in full. Hallelujah! Well, technically, I still need to listen to the drama CD for Clock Tower 2, which has it even been translated into English? And I guess play or watch walkthroughs of Ghost Head and Clock Tower 3 as well, but I'm not really in any rush to do so, to be honest. But yes, I've officially completed my journey throughout the Hifumi Kono duology, and I am so happy. This was such a fun ride. You guys know what that means. Lots more Clock Tower fan art from me. So I first came across the fan translations of the novels while scrolling through Tumblr, and of course I chose to read in order of Jennifer's first and then Helen's. And I remember in the main text body, OP saying that the added scenes with Nolan required some extra forbearance to get through on the part of the reader, and yeah, that warning wasn't put there for nothing, because oh my god, he is such a douchebag. I mean, comparing the characters' portrayals in the novels to how they were in the game, everybody's disagreeableness levels got noticeably cranked up, except for Kay's, weirdly enough, which I'm not sure was done in order to increase the emotional stakes and filling in the character interaction blanks when adapting a game into a passive form of media like a novel, or if this is just a reflection of Osamu Makino's writing style, but whatever the case may be, Nolan was definitely a major casualty of this treatment. During the entire bus stop scene, I felt like I was really grasping at straws trying to figure out how to reconcile this depiction of Nolan with him and Tim being my OTP, and I just decided to pretend this was their way of flirting with each other. Which is why the aftermath of Tim's death in Helen's novel was really bittersweet, because Nolan said that he lost a friend and there were limits to how much he could deal with at once. I was like, I knew it! I knew Nolan didn't actually hate Tim, he's just a tsundere. Since Nolan got the most mad at Tim when he started babbling about horror movies while the two of them were interviewing Barton and first talking about our heroines, I have a headcanon that Nolan was just cranky about Tim using the clock tower murders as a springboard for him to be a nerd, and also for making him look like a fool in front of Jennifer, which, buddy, you would have done that on your own without Tim's involvement, come on! On that note, Nolan is way pushier with Jennifer here, and that just made him even more of a punchable character than he already was in the game. Here I was, prior to reading the novel, thinking that maybe, just maybe, he and Jennifer would be a cute ship if the two of them were both at an age where romance between them wouldn't be illegal, but nope, Nolan's got such a crappy personality here that I have been turned off on this redemption notion completely. When I got to the scene where Jennifer sees 𝚢𝚘𝚎 while Nolan is at the payphone and 𝚢𝚘𝚎 says something to her to the effect of, "Do you plan on scampering off to that man for help? Go ahead, but if you do, I'll chop his head off before yours." Literally the only reaction I had was, "Oh, is that a promise, Edward?" I also took some petty sadness from the fact that he didn't die at the end of Helen's novel, especially considering that Tim died in both novels, but Nolan didn't, and the two of them had so little screen time in Helen's novel compared to Jennifer's that bumping him off wouldn't have been any less unceremonious than Tim's fate. Speaking of child groomers, it was immensely satisfying to see Harris die in Helen's novel. Particularly since I wasn't playing correctly while I was going through her half of the game, because I knew Harris and Tim had timers attached to them where you had to find them in 15 minutes or else they would die, but it was only once I finished reading the books and finally felt safe to go on the wiki that I found out through reading that Harris's decapitated head is found in a stew pot and Tim gets origamied inside the wine barrel just like Beth does in Jennifer's route. So now I really want to replay the game to see if I can stumble upon any other scenes I missed during my first playthroughs, because you have no idea how disheartening it was for me to sacrifice Tim in hopes of watching Harris die, only to see his stupid face slink out at the pantry once again as I yelled at my screen, wondering what I did wrong. Okay, one last thing about novel Nolan that I want to vent about here. While I do understand that his added backstory of his younger siblings' remains being found during the investigation of the clock tower murders was in all likelihood intended to make him more sympathetic in light of just how problematic he is, this is just me, but I think that detail inculpates him even more. Like, in response to the trauma of losing his little sister, now he has a distorted view of underage girls. Especially when you consider that Julia's age when she died was explicitly stated to be 15, which is the exact age Jennifer is during the events of the story, and this information about how old Jennifer is was communicated to Nolan multiple times before he even mentioned his sister. Speaking as a writer, in theory, on paper, I appreciate how complex of a character Nolan is, since he's supposed to be one of the good guys, despite being extremely flawed in ways that require gods to pay more attention to him than falsely accusing him of Rick's murder. And I think having a character like that, especially in a family-unfriendly game created for an adult audience, is way more interesting and makes a lot more sense than just having the characters be either morally black and morally white without having any room for nuance. But, speaking as a consumer, the specific way in which the creators chose to have Nolan be flawed is, a big yikes! Wow, okay, I wasn't expecting to start complaining so much about Nolan right out of the gate. Let's dial things back a little bit. While I did have fun with the novels, I felt like I started reading them for the wrong reason, because you have to understand, throughout my life I have struggled tremendously with a cycle of discovering a series and getting way too enthusiastic about it, to the point where I start creating fandom content for that series right away, even if I barely know anything about it at that point. So all of my fan art and fanfics just end up being really weird and stupid because my first-hand knowledge of the canon was foggy at best. I was desperate to avoid falling into that trap with any clock tower fan art I would create, especially since at the time I started getting inspired for the manga I was talking about earlier that I wanted to draw for Bobby and Dan's birthday. Clock Tower Rewind was still the only game I had played by that point, so I knew I needed to slam the brakes on this stream of ideas and prioritize getting myself up to speed with lore of the first two games and their adaptations so that I could tighten up these concepts in my brain with a lot more purpose and confidence and with little risk of getting jossed right out of the gate. Specifically and especially Particularly, I wanted to do justice to the parts of the manga that primarily focus on Edward and have them call back to the parts featuring Bobby in a meaningful way. That being said, I do think making that my primary objective for taking the novels off my TBR was a mistake, because reading them and seeing all the creative liberties that were taken from the original games and lore drops Hifumi Kono shared in interviews just made me even more confused about how I should approach this silly project and even what value there would be in creating it at all. But those were my feelings when I was going through Jennifer's novel. By the time I picked up Helen's, I had a lot more time to sit with what I had read up to that point and I guess recover from the initial shock value, which allowed me to get way more immersed in what I was reading. Because most of my fiction is consumed through means of visual storytelling, there's a pretty strong imbalance between how many comics and manga I read versus how many novels I read, so as a result, I'm not confident in my ability to tell the difference between good prose and bad, but as far as subjective opinions go, I felt like both novels had pretty good prose. Maybe similes were relied on a little too much, but that minor detail aside, the writing style was extremely immersive, and I applaud the translator for their ability to express the emotional and sensory peaks of these passages in a language foreign to the source material. This was especially true when describing scenes that happened in the first Fear, because that game is so much more quiet and isolated compared to the sequel, which made the added focus on those events feel extra impactful. It was an inspired choice to make the guy telling you which path to take in these choose your own adventure novel books a character in and of themselves, and it almost reminded me of how the tutorials from the Danganronpa games are presented. I also think it's kind of hilarious how, even though it was trying my best to dodge spoilers and have my reading experience be as blind as possible, there were some crackhead canons I had about some of the characters that ended up being substantiated in the novels. Just to name a few, there was that whole diatribe I went on about Julia's murder directly influencing Nolan's creepiness, which felt even more plausible once I saw in context her age when she died. Another infamous Nolan moment has to do with my way of making sense of his notorious toilet scene from the game, was to have his reminiscing be about times where he partied too hard and got absolutely wasted. So seeing the novel confirm that he was a lightweight made me laugh way more than I'd like to admit. It made me feel good about myself. Then there's the scene in Jennifer's novel where the gang was driving to the Barrows Castle and Tim and Beth became buddies during the trip, which validated the two of them being my platonic OTP by confirming a hunch I already had about their unique brands of silliness making them compatible with one another, and it was just so cute to see. I've talked in other videos about how Tim was already one of my favorite characters even just from playing the game, and the added attention he got in Jennifer's novel made me love him even more. I found him very relatable here too, because I'm also a chubby goofball with zero survival skills who won't shut up about my special interests and can't read a room. Isn't it the foundation on which my entire channel was built anyway? By the way, I was going through parts of Jennifer's novel again, and I gotta ask, which character is this line referring to? When I first read it, I assumed it was directed at Tim, but now I'm not sure. It could just as easily be Nolan now that I think about it. Considering how I feel about Nolan, I really hope it actually is Tim. Sticking with the theme of prolix famine-resistant men, I wasn't prepared for just how much my impression of a character could change depending on which novel they were being described in by the main heroine, and with no character is this more evident than Sullivan. In Jennifer's novel, I thought he was really annoying, and I seriously felt her pain as she was having to listen to his rambling, but in Helen's novel, he was much more endearing, and I was left thinking how I would happily listen to him go on tangents about primitive religions. To a lesser extent, I felt the same way about Gotts, especially comparing both library scenes in the novel where Jennifer gets frustrated with both the author of the book, and by extension Gotts for essentially victim blaming, while Helen appreciates the author's commitment to objectivity, although obviously this has less to do with Jennifer and Helen's unique appraisals of different characters, and more about the experiences they had that formed how they processed the information they were reading about. On that note, one thing about the novel that severely let me down was how much bickering there was between Gotts and Helen and her side of the story. Now, I really loved the snappy banter between the characters in Jennifer's novel, and it was great to see the characters from both the university building side and the also weekly news side all interact and overlap more with each other, but in Helen's novel, where that same level of interaction doesn't exist and the tone feels more serious than in Jennifer's side, I thought having the additional focus on Helen and Gotts being characterized by them arguing was a huge disappointment. So one of the things I loved most about the game was Helen and Gotts' dynamic. I'm already starved for super close platonic male-female relationships in fiction enough as it is, and when you combine that with Helen and Gotts having very strong yet opposing personalities, with her being more proactive and determined, and him being more closed-minded and curmudgeonly. But even with their differences, they're still able to communicate each other openly and respectfully. Then you have a really special and beautifully written friendship that I am fiercely protective of. So don't play with my emotions like that, Makino! That being said, Gotsu's death scene in the novel was still able to get me choked up, so that should count for something. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum of Helen's relationships with old geezers, nothing could have prepared me for the reveal that Helen and Barton doing the deed with each other was actually canon. I genuinely believed Harris was lying about that because of how much of a horny and spiteful piece of human waste he is. So, alright, his motive in Jennifer's novel just got 50 times stronger before I had time to blink. That's great! Even before I picked up the game, Barton was always a character who weirdly intrigued me, and it's been fascinating to see him play out when playing the game and reading the books. I love characters whose outward personas carry a lot of authority and respect when deep down they're fighting a losing battle with their own sense of morality, and Helen's novel in particular ratcheted that up to 11 to make Barton absolutely terrifying. With the added spotlight given to him in Helen's novel in mind, it makes him all the more of a complex and interesting figure when you get to Jennifer's novel, where he goes to the extreme of committing suicide so he couldn't hear Scissorman's telepathic voice anymore after he strangled Beth. I also wasn't expecting Edward to get more screen time in Helen's novel than in Jennifer's. I thought it would be the other way around, considering he has more of a personal connection to Jennifer, so that was interesting. In both the game and the books, it was really cool to see the same setting through the lens of a traumatized teenager who's using her wits to survive, and a capable adult who has many more resources at her disposal, and I think that dichotomy was even stronger in the novels. In particular, I loved how Helen was depicted in the novels and the balance that was struck between her mature, responsible, scientifically minded side and her flawed, vulnerable, abused side. Both sides provided different perspectives of the same person without ever feeling like she was out of character, and it made her feel very realistic. It's hard to say where I would rank the novel adaptations next to the game since they're very different from each other, but I think the best answer I can give is that I like both equally for various reasons. As far as which perspective I like the most between the two versions, I think in the game I preferred Jennifer's side, while in the novels Helen's side had the edge. Final thoughts. Just like with the original Clock Tower games, the novel adaptations awakened in me an interest in horror that I didn't really know I had before, especially since these were technically the only horror books I've ever read that weren't written by R.L. Stine. Why am I admitting this out loud? This is embarrassing. Anyway, in addition to taking more horror games off my backlog, now I want to start reading more horror novels. Is this the part where I become a library hermit and start mowing down all the Stephen King books I can find? Not all of the reading I did these past 2 months was just for entertainment alone, as I made the journey back to school and to familiarize myself more with the fundamentals of art with the book Framed Ink by Marcos Mateo Mestre. I don't even remember how I first came across this book. I think it was through a Mallow's Art Tricks YouTube short of all things, but man oh man, am I glad I did. It is a absolute masterclass of composition, and if you're at all interested in art or design or other creative professions, then I literally cannot recommend this book enough. By the time I had discovered this book, I had already finished all the thumbnails and pencils for Croquis and Candlelight and was moving on to the final inking stage, so I was really excited to take from what I had learned during this first read-through and apply it to my future manga, and learn I did. In the past, whenever I would lay out a scene for an illustration or a comic page, I feel like I was always just going off of vibes, arranging elements at certain angles with some degree of purpose, but mostly finagling things around until they just look good to my eyes. While reading this book, I could practically feel my third eye opening in real time, and it really encouraged me not just to tackle future compositions with much more intentionality than I had before, but also to break down these elements of an illustration or comic panel down to its most basic components, since I have notoriously struggled for my entire life with doing final rendering before jotting down a rough sketch to work off of first. So anytime I'm able to unlock new information on how I can jump into the art creation process by blocking in simple shapes and colors without getting bogged down by the details is always a massive win for me. Seriously, where was this book when I needed it most during October last year? This book is available for free to read on the Internet Archive, and that's how I first read it, but I highly recommend purchasing a physical copy because it is absolutely worth the money. I actually went and splurged on basically all of the framed ink, framed perspective, and framed environment design books as soon as I finished reading volume 1 of Framed Ink in question, and I have zero regrets. Also, reading this book really makes me want to go back and watch Prince of Egypt again. The entire movie is just pure eye candy from start to finish, but what always stood out to me the most was how masterfully staged and lit every scene was. So when I saw the back of the book and noticed that movie was listed among the author's credits in his bio, it made all the sense in the world to me. I think we've all encountered tutorials from professionals who can understand the concept they're teaching about on a practical level, but when you look at their actual works, there's a noticeable gulf between their artistic knowledge and the creations being showcased in their portfolio. So with these books, you really are learning from the best. And that's going to be it for my June and July artist recap. June was a very slow month for me, but a lot of good things happened to me in July, and I'm ready to make my comeback. I hope you're excited to see what I have in store too. With that said, it's time for me to shut this video down. Make sure to give Boba Cat some pats, snacks, and playtime before you log out, and head to the description of this video to find links for every other corner of cyberspace I'm on. Funding for this channel was provided by my Patreon and Ko-fi members. If you enjoy my creations and want to see more from me, then consider joining for as low as $1 a month. Thanks for letting me chat with you, and until next time, can you believe I was actually able to talk about something positive in a retrospective for once?